I stepped through the doors of the Pine Creek Gas and Go with the desperation of a broke college graduate. The place smelled like stale coffee and cheap cleaner, exactly what you'd expect from a 24-hour convenience store in the middle of nowhere, Montana. But the starting pay was $15 an hour, and after 3 months of job rejections, I wasn't about to get picky. The owner stood behind the counter. Raymond barely checked my resume before hiring me on the spot for the overnight shift, midnight to 8 a.m. "You get $1 extra for night hours," he said, counting out cash from the register, "and another $1 if you follow the rules." I nodded, thinking he meant standard stuff. Don't steal, don't sleep on the job, whatever. But then he pulled out a handwritten note from under the counter and slid it toward me. "These are the important ones, the ones you don't break." I picked up the paper expecting inventory procedures or emergency contacts. Instead, I found 5 numbered rules written in shaky handwriting. 1. If an old man in a brown coat stands at the back of the store, greet him. Do not ignore him. 2. Do not make eye contact with anyone standing by the ice freezer after midnight. 3. If a woman with messy hair asks for cigarettes and doesn't have enough money, give them to her anyway. 4. Stay inside between 2 and 3 a.m. no matter what you hear on the roof. 5. Check the security cameras regularly. If you see someone with glowing eyes, hide in the storage room until they leave. I laughed, looking up at Raymond. Is this some kind of joke? Hazing the new guy? His face didn't change. "You want that extra $1 an hour?" "Yeah, of course." "Then follow the rules." He tapped the paper with a scarred index finger. "I'll be back at dawn. Don't call unless the place is on fire." And just like that, I was alone in a gas station with a list of rules that sounded like they came from a bad horror movie. For the first few hours, everything was normal. A couple truckers stopped for coffee. A group of teenagers bought snacks. Some guy filled up his pickup truck and paid in mostly quarters. Normal small-town Montana stuff. By 11, the place was empty. I restocked the coolers, swept the floor, and checked my phone every 5 minutes out of boredom. The list of rules sat on the counter, and I kept glancing at it, wondering if Raymond was just screwing with me. At exactly 11:30 p.m., I remember checking my phone. The lights flashed. Just once, quick, like someone had messed with the breaker. I looked up and felt my skin go cold. There was an old man standing at the back of the store by the ATM. He wore a brown coat that hung down to his ankles. His face was thin, all sharp angles, and he stood completely still. I hadn't heard the door chime, hadn't seen him come in on the security monitor behind the counter. Hello?" I called out. "Can I help you find something?" No response. The old man just stood there, staring straight ahead. The lights flashed again, longer this time, and the coolers made a strange grinding noise. That's when I remembered the first rule. "Good evening, sir," I said, forcing my voice to sound normal. "Welcome to Gas and Go." The instant I said it, the lights stabilized. The grinding noise stopped. The old man in the brown coat gave a single small nod. When I blinked, he was gone. I ran to the back of the store, checking the aisles, even looking in the bathroom. Nobody. The front door hadn't opened. The little electronic chime would have gone off. He had just disappeared. Okay, that was weird, I muttered, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. Just stress and fatigue playing tricks on my eyes. Around midnight, I was stocking cigarettes behind the counter when movement outside caught my eye. Someone was standing beside the ice freezer, just standing there, not moving toward the store, not buying ice, just standing. I reached for the button that would turn on the outside lights for a better look when I remembered rule number 2. Don't make eye contact with anyone standing by the ice freezer after midnight. My hand froze above the button. I slowly lowered my gaze to the counter and kept it there, fighting every instinct to look up. Minutes passed. Every so often I would catch a glimpse of movement in my peripheral vision, like whoever it was had changed position, but I kept my eyes down. After what felt like an hour, but was probably only 10 minutes, I risked a quick glance at the security monitor that showed the front of the store. The ice freezer was empty. No one was there. I sighed with relief. At 1:15 a.m., the door chime finally rang. A woman walked in. Her hair looked messy and wild. Her clothes weren't dirty, but they hung loosely on her body like she'd put them on in a hurry. "Pack of Marlboro Reds," she said, coming up to the counter. Her voice was raspy but not unpleasant. I grabbed the cigarettes and rang them up. "That'll be $8.75. She dug through her pockets and placed 6 crumpled dollar bills on the counter. "Sorry," I said. "You're a bit short." The woman looked at me with really clear eyes. "That's all I have." Rule 3 came to mind. If a woman with messy hair asks for cigarettes and doesn't have enough money, give them to her anyway. Every bit of retail training in me screamed that this was wrong, but those rules stuck with me, so I slid the pack toward her. "It's fine, just take them." She didn't smile, didn't thank me. She simply took the cigarettes and walked out. I watched her on the security monitor, expecting her to get into a car or walk down the road, but she simply walked out of frame and didn't appear on any of the other camera views. At exactly 2:00 a.m., it started. A heavy thud directly above my head, like someone had jumped onto the roof. Then another, and another. Soon it sounded like someone, or something, was pacing back and forth overhead. The ceiling creaked under the weight. I picked up the phone, about to call Raymond despite his warning, when I remembered Rule 4. Stay inside between 2 and 3:00 a.m., no matter what you hear on the roof. The footsteps grew louder, heavier. It didn't sound like a person anymore. It sounded huge. The entire building seemed to shake with each step. Something scraped across the rooftop, a sound like claws on metal. I put the phone down and moved away from the door. Whatever was up there, I wasn't going to check. The hour passed with the constant pounding overhead. At 3:00 a.m. exactly, it stopped. The sudden silence felt almost as disturbing as the noise had been. By 3:30 a.m., I'd almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. The old man, the person by the ice freezer, the woman, the footsteps. Maybe this was all an elaborate prank on the new guy. Maybe Raymond had friends helping him out, and there were speakers hidden in the ceiling. As if on cue, I remembered Rule 5. Check the security cameras regularly. I turned to the monitor behind the counter and flipped through the different camera views. Parking lot, empty. Side of building, clear. Back of building, nothing. Then I switched to the camera that covered the gas pumps. A figure stood there, tall and extremely skinny. Its head was tilted up, looking directly at the camera. Even through the grainy black and white footage, I could see its eyes. They glowed like tiny flashlights. I moved back from the monitor, remembering the last part of Rule 5. If you see someone with glowing eyes, hide in the storage room until they leave. I ran to the storage room at the back of the store, locked the door behind me, and crouched among boxes of chips and candy. Time passed slowly in that tiny room. I didn't have my phone. It was still at the counter. I had no way to check the time or the cameras. I just sat there in the semi-darkness, listening for any sound from the main store. After what felt like hours, I heard the front door chime. Then footsteps, normal, human footsteps, and Raymond's voice calling out. "Right. You in here? Your shift's over." I stumbled out of the storage room, probably looking like I'd seen a ghost. In a way, I had. Raymond stood by the counter, counting the money in the register like it was just another normal morning. "What the hell was all that?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "The old man, the roof, the thing with the glowing eyes. What is this place?" Raymond looked up at me with those weathered eyes and actually smiled. "You followed all the rules. Not bad for your first night." "I want an explanation," I said, trying to sound firm despite how badly I was shaking. "No, you don't," he replied, still counting bills. "What you want is to forget about it, but you won't." He finished with the register and looked at me directly. "So, will I see you tomorrow night?" The smart answer was no. The obvious answer was hell no. I should have walked out and never looked back, but my bank account was empty. My rent was due in a week, and honestly, under all that fear was something else. Curiosity. "Yeah," I said, surprising myself. "I'll be here." Raymond nodded like he'd expected nothing else. "Good. Same time. Don't be late." I walked out into the morning sunshine, trying to make sense of what had happened. Part of me hoped it had all been some kind of hallucination from being tired. But even in the Montana air and bright daylight, I couldn't forget what I'd seen. I'd be back tonight. I'd follow those rules again. And maybe eventually I'd get some answers. But one thing was clear. The Gas and Go in Pine Creek was more than just a convenience store, and I had somehow become part of whatever was happening there. I walked back into the Gas and Go for my third night shift, with a weird mix of feeling scared and ready to face whatever happened. The automatic doors opened with their usual electronic chime, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like nothing was wrong. Like this was just a normal convenience store in the middle of nowhere. Montana. Raymond stood behind the counter counting cigarette cartons. He barely looked up when I came in. "You're early," he said, marking something on his inventory sheet. "Wanted to get settled in," I replied, hanging my jacket on the hook in the back room. The truth was, I hadn't been able to sleep much during the day. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that person with the bright eyes staring at me through the security camera, or the old man in the brown coat showing up out of nowhere, or heard those massive footsteps on the roof. $15 an hour plus the $2 bonus for following the rules meant $17 an hour, the best pay I could find with my useless English degree. Raymond finished his counting and grabbed his jacket. "Register's got enough change. Coffee's fresh. Don't call me unless—" "The place is on fire," I finished for him. "I know." He gave me a long look, then nodded and left without another word. The first few hours were busy with the usual customers, truckers grabbing coffee before the long haul up I-90, locals buying beer, teenagers pooling crumpled bills for snacks. Normal stuff that made it easy to forget what happened after midnight. Around 10, things slowed down. The store emptied out, and I found myself alone with just the noise of coolers and my thoughts. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app where I'd started documenting everything. I wasn't going to be caught off guard again. If I was spending my nights with these, whatever they were, I wanted to understand them, know their patterns, maybe find some way to make sense of it all. I typed Pine Creek gas station history into my phone's search bar. Most results were useless. Tourism pages, business directories, maps. But buried in the search results, I found a link to the Pine Creek Gazette archives. The local newspaper had put their back issues online going back to the mid-1980s. I started with gas station death and immediately got a hit from 1992. Local man found dead at Gas and Go. May 14, 1992. The body of Thomas Brenner, 43, was discovered yesterday morning outside the Gas and Go convenience store on Highway 10. According to Sheriff Dale Wilson, Brenner's body was found by the store owner when he arrived to open the business. The cause of death remains undetermined pending autopsy results. Witnesses report that Brenner's face showed signs of extreme terror. Brenner had recently been hired as the night attendant at the gas station. I felt a cold tingle down my spine. I searched again, this time for Gas and Go death. 2 more articles appeared. Woman's body discovered at local gas station November 3, 2003. Anna Liu, 27, was found dead early yesterday morning in the parking lot of the Gas and Go convenience store. The night employee reported hearing unusual noises around 2:15 a.m. but did not investigate. When the owner arrived at 5:00 a.m., he discovered Liu's body near the ice freezer. Authorities have not released the cause of death, but sources close to the investigation note that Liu's expression was frozen in a state of terror. Family members report that Liu had recently taken the night shift position at the gas station. Unexplained death at highway gas station, February 21st, 2015. Police are investigating the death of Jason Mercer, 32, whose body was found outside the Gas and Go early Monday morning. According to owner Raymond Keller, Mercer had been employed as the night attendant for less than 2 weeks. "I told him to stay inside during his shift," Keller stated. "He didn't listen." The medical examiner has yet to determine a cause of death, though first responders noted the victim's face showed signs of extreme fear. Raymond Keller, so that was Raymond's last name. And he'd been the owner for at least 30 years. I set my phone down, trying to process what I'd read. 3 people dead, all night shift workers, all found outside the store, all with expressions of terror. The chime of the door startled me, and I quickly put my phone away. A middle-aged woman bought a pack of gum and left. When the store was empty again, I pulled out a small notebook I'd brought with me. Time to get organized. I made a page for each entity, writing down everything I'd noticed so far. Old man in brown coat appears at exactly 11:30 p.m. Stands still at back of store, disappears after being greeted, no sounds, no movement unless acknowledged. Rule: greet him, don't ignore him. Ice freezer man appears at midnight exactly, stands beside outdoor ice freezer, stays for approximately 10-15 minutes, never enters store. Rule: don't make eye contact. Woman with messy hair arrives between 1 now and 1:30 a.m., always asks for Marlboro Reds, always 275 short. Hair looks wind-blown even when there's no wind. Rule: give her the cigarettes, regardless of payment. Roof walker. Begins at 2 a.m. exactly, continues until precisely 3 a.m. Sounds too heavy to be human. Seems to walk in patterns across roof. Rule: stay inside, no matter what you hear. Glowing eyes appears randomly throughout night. Can be seen only on security cameras. Never enters store. Stands completely still, watching. Rule: hide in storage room until it leaves. I looked at my notes, trying to see if there was any pattern beyond their timing. What was the purpose of these appearances? What happened if you broke the rules? Based on those news articles, nothing good. I flipped to a new page and wrote, pattern. Then I listed what each entity seemed to be testing. Old man. Respect, acknowledging someone's presence. Ice freezer man. Restraint, resisting the urge to look. Messy hair woman. Generosity, giving without receiving. Roof walker. Obedience, staying put despite curiosity. Glowing eyes. Courage, facing fear by hiding. They weren't just random hauntings, they were tests. Each one seemed designed to evaluate a specific human response. The bell chimed again as the door opened. I checked my watch, 11:25 p.m. I quickly tucked the notebook under the counter. A truck driver came in for coffee and a bathroom break. As he paid, I looked at the security monitor. Empty parking lot, empty sidewalk, empty ice freezer area. For now. The trucker left and I checked my watch again, 11:29 p.m. 1 minute later, right on schedule, the old man in the brown coat appeared at the back of the store. I didn't jump this time. I'd been expecting him. "Good evening, sir." "Welcome to Gas and Go," I said clearly. The old man nodded once, then was gone. The rest of the night followed the same pattern as before. The man by the ice freezer at midnight. The woman asking for cigarettes around 1:15 a.m. The heavy footsteps on the roof from 2 to 3 a.m. And twice, I had to hide from the glowing-eyed figure on the cameras. But this time, I took notes after each encounter. Small details I hadn't noticed before. The old man's coat had brass buttons with some kind of insignia. The ice freezer man left small puddles where he stood. Not water, but something that looked like water but evaporated almost instantly. The woman with messy hair always put the cigarettes in her left pocket, never opening the pack. The footsteps on the roof followed a specific pattern. 3 steps forward, 2 to the right, 3 steps back, 2 to the left. Over and over. The glowing-eyed figure tilted its head exactly 45 degrees when looking at the camera. Little things, probably meaningless. But I wrote them down anyway. It was getting light outside when Raymond showed up at 7:45 a.m. "Morning," he said, hanging up his jacket. "Any problems?" "No," I replied, closing my notebook. "Everything went according to the rules." Raymond nodded, looking pleased, or at least as pleased as his weathered face could look. I grabbed my jacket, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Depends on what it is." "How many night shift workers have you had before me?" Raymond's eyes narrowed slightly. "Why do you want to know?" "Just curious," I said, trying to sound casual. "You seemed surprised I came back after the first night." He shrugged. "Most don't. Last guy couldn't handle it. Quit after a week." "What about before him?" I pressed. "Some stay a few weeks, some a few months." He started counting the money in the register. "Ones that follow the rules tend to last longer, and the ones that don't follow the rules." Raymond's hands stopped moving. He looked up at me with those weathered eyes. "They don't tend to last at all." The way he said it sent a chill through me. "Get some sleep, right?" he said, returning to the register. "See you tomorrow night." I nodded and went for the door. As I passed behind the counter, something caught my eye. A small square outline in the floor that didn't quite match the rest of the linoleum. I'd never noticed it before. It looked like a trap door. I looked at Raymond, but he was busy with the register, his back to me. The door would have to wait. But tomorrow night, when Raymond left and before any of the entities showed up, I was going to find out what was under that trap door. I arrived at the Gas and Go an hour before my shift started. The sun was low in the Montana sky, making the mountains look orange and purple. Raymond's truck wasn't in the parking lot. Good. I needed time alone with that trap door. "You're early again," said Diane, the evening shift cashier. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes from juggling this job with community college classes. "Raymond just left about 20 minutes ago. Said he had to pick up supplies in Billings." "Perfect. That meant he wouldn't be back until much later." "Just eager to start," I said, trying to sound casual. "Why don't you head out? I can take over." Diane didn't need to be told twice. She grabbed her backpack and was out the door within minutes, leaving me alone in the store. I locked the front door and flipped the sign to "Closed." I'd reopen in 15 minutes, but first I needed to check what was under that trapdoor without any customers interrupting. Behind the counter, I got down on my hands and knees and looked at the square outline I'd noticed yesterday. It was definitely a trapdoor, about 2 feet by 2 feet, with the linoleum carefully cut to hide the edges. There was no handle, but when I pressed one edge, the opposite side lifted slightly. I grabbed the raised edge and pulled. The door came up with a soft creak, showing a small storage space beneath the floor. It wasn't deep, maybe 2 feet, but it had just one thing inside, a leather-bound journal that looked decades old. I took the journal out and put it on the counter. The leather was cracked and worn smooth in spots from years of use. There was no title on the cover, just a simple symbol that looked like a circle with a vertical line through it. When I opened it, a slip of paper fell out. A Polaroid photograph showing a younger Raymond standing in front of the Gas and Go. The store looked almost identical, except for an old-style gas pump visible at the edge of the frame. The photo was dated August 1972. The first page of the journal had an inscription: "To whoever finds this, follow the rules. Your life depends on it. JK." I turned to the next page and started reading. The entries began in 1972, written in clear handwriting, August 15th, 1972. First night at the new job. Mr. Keller says I need to follow specific rules during the night shift. They sound crazy, but the pay is good. An old man in a coat appeared out of nowhere tonight. I nearly had a heart attack until I remembered to greet him. Raymond. Raymond? This was Raymond's journal from when he first started working here. I flipped forward through the pages, reading entries. September 3rd, 1972. The woman came again for cigarettes, always short on money, always the same brand. I've started keeping track of their appearances. They follow patterns. Mr. Keller says that's how we know they're not human. October 21st, 1972. Full moon tonight. Mr. Keller warned me they would all come at once. He was right. The most terrifying night of my life. But I survived by following every rule to the letter. December 10th, 1972. Found Mr. Keller's body this morning. Heart attack, the doctor said. But his face... He looked terrified. The store is mine now. The lawyer had the papers ready, like Mr. Keller knew this was coming. With ownership comes responsibility. I understand that now. I kept reading, getting more worried with each page. The entries continued through the years, and new handwriting appeared. Different night attendants that Raymond had hired, each adding their own experiences to the journal. Some entries ended abruptly. Their writers had broken the rules. I found Thomas Brenner's last entry from 1992 where he wrote about refusing to give the messy-haired woman her cigarettes. The next entry was Raymond's, noting that Thomas's body had been found outside the next morning. Anna Liu's final entry in 2003 described her plan to check out the roof noises despite the rules. She never wrote again. Jason Mercer in 2015 decided the glowing-eyed figure was just someone trying to scare him and went outside to confront it. His entry ended mid-sentence. I sat back, trying to process what I was reading. Raymond wasn't the creator of these rules. He was just continuing them, just as Mr. Keller had been before him and someone else before that. According to the journal, the gas station sat on what several writers called a thin spot, a place where the boundary between our world and something else had worn thin. These things weren't simply monsters, but tests, making sure humans respected the boundary. One writer from the 1980s had drawn diagrams of the gas station, marking energy patterns and key points. The store itself sat at the center of these patterns, serving as a kind of anchor. I checked my watch, 11:15 p.m. I needed to reopen the store. I carefully placed the journal back in its hiding spot and closed the trap door, making sure the linoleum lined up properly. Then I unlocked the front door and flipped the sign back to open. A few customers came and went over the next 15 minutes. A woman buying milk, a teenager getting energy drinks, normal people with normal needs, completely unaware of what this place really was. At 11:30 p.m. exactly, the old man in the brown coat appeared at the back of the store. But something was different this time. He stood in the same spot, wore the same coat, but his eyes seemed more alert, like he knew I'd read the journal. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Gas and Go," I said, keeping my voice steady. The old man looked at me a little longer than usual before nodding. Then, instead of leaving right away, he turned his head slightly, looking toward the counter where the trap door was hidden, before he left. He knows, I thought. At midnight, the man by the ice freezer showed up right on time. I kept my eyes down, but took quick looks at the security monitor. He seemed to be standing closer to the window than before, his face turned directly toward the camera. The woman with messy hair came in at 1:17 a.m. She asked for her Marlboro Reds as always, but when she placed her money on the counter, still $2.75 short, she spoke again. "You learn fast," she said, her voice low but clear. "Not everyone does." I pushed the cigarettes toward her, trying to hide my surprise. What else should I know? She took the pack and tucked it into her left pocket without opening it, just like all the other nights. "The moon fills tomorrow," she said, looking at me with those startlingly clear eyes. "Be ready." Then she walked out, disappearing from the camera feeds as usual. The heavy footsteps on the roof came at 2 a.m., but they sounded heavier tonight, shaking the ceiling lights. The pattern was the same, 3 steps forward, 2 right, 3 back, 2 left, but each step hit harder, like it was trying to get my attention. At 3:17 a.m., the figure with glowing eyes showed up on the security cameras by the gas pumps. But instead of just standing still like other nights, this time it raised a really long arm and pointed right at the store before I ran to hide in the back room. When Raymond got here at 7:50 a.m., I had a bunch of questions ready. "Morning," he said, hanging up his jacket. "Everything normal last night?" I considered my options. If I admitted to finding the journal, what would he do? But if all the entities knew I'd read it, Raymond probably did too. "Found the journal," I said simply, watching his reaction. Raymond froze for a second, then continued counting the money in the register as if I hadn't said anything remarkable. "Figured you might," he finally replied. "Smart kid like you, noticing details." "Why didn't you tell me about the full moon?" I asked. He looked up, his weathered face unreadable. "Because most don't make it that far. No point explaining Rule 6 when you might break 1 through 5. What happens during the full moon?" Raymond glanced at the calendar on the wall, then back at me. "They all come at once. All 5 of them, all night. It's a test." He paused. "The final test." "A test for what?" "Get some sleep, right?" he said, turning away. "You'll need it for tomorrow night." I left the gas station and walked to my car, the morning sun not helping with how cold I felt. According to the journal, the full moon was when the boundary between worlds was at its thinnest, when all the entities gathered to check out the human guardian. I checked my phone's calendar app. Full moon tomorrow night, just as Raymond and the journal had said, what the woman with messy hair had warned me about. As I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been led here for a reason, that my desperate search for any job that would hire a broke English major had been guided by something more than just luck. Tomorrow night would tell me if I was right. The afternoon sun came through my apartment blinds as I laid out the items I got. A container of salt, iron nails from the hardware store, and 3 bundles of dried sage. The journal had mentioned these as protective measures that previous attendants had used during full moon nights. I didn't know exactly how to use them, but the entries suggested creating barriers at doorways and windows with the salt, placing iron nails at the 4 corners of the building, and burning the sage to purify the air. It all sounded like superstitious nonsense. But then again, so did the existence of 5 supernatural entities that haunted a Montana gas station. My phone alarm beeped. It was time to head to work. I packed everything into my backpack, along with a flashlight, extra batteries, and the small notebook where I'd been recording my observations. Tonight would be different from all the others. All 5 entities would appear simultaneously during the full moon. The gas and go looked ordinary in the evening light as I pulled into the parking lot. The faded sign with its neon gas prices, the smudged windows, the ice freezer by the side of the building, nothing about it suggested this place was anything but a typical rural convenience store. Yet, according to the journal, it sat on a thin spot, a weakness in the boundary between our world and something else. Diane was organizing the candy display when I walked in. "You're early again," she said, giving me a curious look. "You okay? You look like you haven't slept." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just want to get a head start tonight." "Whatever you say." She shrugged. "Raymond was in a weird mood earlier, more grumpy than usual. Said to tell you he'll see you before dawn." "Something about inventory?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Raymond was planning to come to the store before dawn, exactly when the journal mentioned the convergence ritual would end. Once again, he'd known what would happen before I did. After Diane left, I locked the door and flipped the sign to closed. I had preparations to make before reopening for the night shift. Following the instructions from the journal, I first created thin lines of salt across every doorway: the front door, the back door, the bathroom door, and the storage room door. I placed iron nails at the 4 corners of the building, walking quickly around the outside perimeter as the sky darkened. When I re-entered the store, I lit one of the sage bundles and let the smoke fill the space, focusing particularly on the corners and the area behind the counter where the trapdoor was hidden. The journal had been specific about this. The smoke needed to touch every part of the interior. By the time I finished, it was 8:45 p.m. I unlocked the front door, flipped the sign back to open, and waited behind the counter, wondering if any of the entities would notice my preparations. The first few hours were eerily quiet. Usually there would be a steady trickle of customers, but tonight only 2 people came in. A woman buying milk who left quickly, and an old rancher getting coffee and cigarettes who commented on the funny smell in the store. By 11:15 p.m., no one had entered the Gas and Go for over an hour. I watched the security monitors looking around the empty parking lot and the dark road beyond. The full moon hung large and bright in the sky. I checked my preparations one more time, salt lines intact, sage still smoldering in the back room, iron nails in place, the journal in my back pocket where I could reach it if needed. At precisely midnight, the store phone rang. I jumped even though I was expecting something to happen at this hour. The old-fashioned landline almost never rang during my shifts. I picked up the receiver. Gas and Go. You found the journal. Raymond's voice was tense, lacking its usual gruffness. It wasn't a question. Yes, I replied, seeing no point in denying it. Then you know what tonight is. His voice cracked slightly. Listen carefully, Wright. I'll be there before dawn to help with the transition. Until then, follow every rule. All of them will test you at once tonight. The transition, I asked. What transition? There's not enough time to explain everything now. Just know that I've been waiting for someone like you. Someone who pays attention. Who sees the patterns. He paused. Someone who can take my place. Before I could ask another question, Raymond continued. They're about to arrive. Remember, keep your cool. If you let fear take over, they'll know, and they won't accept you. Accept me for what? I pressed. As the new guardian. The line went dead. I stared at the receiver for a long moment before hanging it up. Guardian. The word repeated in my mind, connecting with phrases I'd read in the journal. The guardian of the boundary. The human counterpart to the entities. I didn't have time to process what this meant because at that moment, the lights blinked violently. On the security monitors, I saw all 5 entities appear at the same time, exactly as the journal had warned. The old man in the brown coat stood at the back of the store by the ATM, looking more solid than I'd ever seen him. His eyes locked on me with an intensity that hadn't been there before. Good evening, sir. Welcome to Gas and Go, I said, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. He didn't nod or go away as he usually did. Instead, he stayed perfectly still, watching. On the monitors, I could see the ice freezer man standing outside. But unlike previous nights, he wasn't just standing beside the freezer. He was pushed up against the window, his palms flat on the glass, leaving frost that spread across the surface. I kept my eyes down, careful not to make direct eye contact even through the camera. The bell rang as the front door opened. The woman with the messy hair walked in, but this time, she didn't come to the counter or ask for cigarettes. She simply stood near the magazine rack. Heavy footsteps sounded above, but they weren't following the usual pattern. The roof walker was moving around the entire edge of the building, its steps shaking dust from the ceiling tiles. 3 steps forward, 2 right, 3 back, 2 left. Repeated over and over, but circling the whole store instead of just pacing in one spot. I looked at the security monitors again and felt my blood turn cold. The glowing-eyed figure wasn't just on one camera. It showed up on all of them at the same time, standing in different places outside the store, all facing inward. It was as if there were multiple copies of it, or it could somehow exist in several places at once. I took a deep breath and focused on following the rules. I had already greeted the old man. I kept my eyes away from the ice freezer man. I got ready to grab cigarettes for the messy-haired woman if she asked. I stayed inside despite the roof noises, and although the glowing-eyed figure was on every camera, it hadn't directly looked at me yet, so I didn't need to hide. For over 3 hours, this strange situation continued. None of the strange visitors followed their usual patterns. They simply stayed in place, watching, waiting. The old man never left. The ice freezer man kept his position at the window, frost now covering the entire glass surface. The woman didn't move from the magazine rack. The footsteps continued their steady circuit of the roof. The glowing-eyed figures stood still outside. The air felt tense. My mouth was dry, and sweat formed on my forehead even though the store was cool. At exactly 3:33 a.m., every light in the gas and go went out at once. The security monitors, the coolers, the overhead lights, all dead. The emergency lights kicked on, casting a dim glow over the store. And that's when I saw them. Symbols on the floor that had been invisible before. They glowed with a faint blue light, forming complex patterns that spread out from beneath the counter where the trapdoor was hidden. The markings looked very old, some resembling strange letters, others like math equations, all connected in a complex design that covered the entire floor. The journal had mentioned this, the convergence ritual. During the full moon, when the line between worlds was at its thinnest, these symbols would appear, showing the true nature of the gas station. My God, I whispered, understanding finally dawning. The entities weren't just testing me. They were judging whether I could replace Raymond as guardian of this boundary. The gas and go wasn't just a business. It was a post that needed manning. Raymond had been looking for a successor, and somehow I had passed every test so far. The old man in the brown coat took a step forward, the first movement he'd made all night. The woman with messy hair turned to look at me directly. The frost on the window started to melt as the ice freezer man pulled his hands away from the glass. The footsteps on the roof stopped, and on the emergency-powered security monitors, all the figures with glowing eyes disappeared at once. Something was changing. The air seemed to get thicker, making it harder to breathe. The glowing symbols got brighter, then dimmer, then brighter again. I stayed behind the counter, watching as the entities all moved together. The old man stepped onto one of the glowing symbols. The woman moved to stand on another. Outside, the ice freezer man stood on a third symbol that went beyond the store's walls. I couldn't see the roof walker or the figure with glowing eyes, but I knew they too had found their places in this pattern. The journal had explained that the gas station was at the center of energy lines that came together, a place where worlds met that had existed long before the building was built. The entities weren't monsters. They were guardians of this boundary, just as Raymond was, just as I was being tested to become. The symbols got brighter, lighting up the entire store with blue light. I felt a strange pulling feeling, like something was tugging at me from all directions at once. My ears popped as the air pressure changed. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. The symbols faded. The emergency lights blinked and went out. Then the regular power came back on. The refrigerators made noise. The security monitors turned back on. And the entities were gone. All of them vanished as if they'd never been there. I took a deep breath. According to the journal, the convergence ritual was complete. I had been judged and, apparently, accepted. The front door chime sounded. Raymond walked in, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. He looked around the store, noticing the salt lines, the lingering sage smoke, the iron nails I'd placed earlier. "You did well," he said simply, walking behind the counter to stand beside me. "Better than I expected for your first full moon." "What happens now?" I asked, my voice hoarse from the dry air and tension. Raymond glanced at the clock, 4:45 a.m. "Now," he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small knife. "We complete the transition." Raymond held the knife in his weathered hand, the blade glinting under the fluorescent lights. I stared at it, understanding settling in my stomach like a heavy stone. "Your hand," he said, extending his own left palm upward. "The transition requires blood from both guardians. I hesitated, but only for a second. The journal entries had hinted at this, a blood ritual that sealed the passing of responsibility. I reached out, palm up, mirroring Raymond's position. "Not too deep," he instructed as he placed the knife in my hand, just enough to let a few drops fall. The knife was small but sharp, with a handle worn smooth over time. I pushed it against my palm and cut my skin, wincing as it hurt. Blood came out right away, red against my skin. Raymond took the knife and cut his palm too, not even flinching. He'd done this ritual so many times that the pain didn't bother him anymore. "Now," he said, nodding toward the floor where faint blue symbols still pulsed with energy. "Let your blood fall onto the center mark." I moved to the spot behind the counter where the trap door was hidden and held my hand over the largest symbol. 3 drops of blood fell onto the glowing mark. The symbol got brighter, and I felt a weird shake through the floor under my feet. Raymond stepped forward and put his bleeding hand above mine. His blood mixed with mine on the symbol, and the blue light got stronger, spreading out along the pattern until all the markings glowed bright. The air pressure changed again. My ears popped and I swallowed to feel better. Outside, the creatures had made a perfect circle around the building. The old man in the brown coat stood at the back door. The messy-haired woman waited by the front entrance. The ice freezer man stayed at his spot by the window. The roof walker had come down to ground level and stood visible for the first time, a huge, bulky figure with shoulders too wide to be human. And the glowing-eyed thing finished the circle, its skinny body barely visible in the moonlight. "They're acknowledging the transition," Raymond said, watching them through the windows. "They recognize you now." As my blood mixed with Raymond's on the symbol, I felt a change happening. Not just around me, but inside me too. I suddenly knew things I didn't before. I could feel where the property ended like I just knew. I could tell exactly where everyone was standing without having to look. The thin spot between worlds felt real now, like something I could almost touch. "What's happening to me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You're becoming the Guardian," Raymond answered. "Your consciousness is expanding to include the boundary. It'll take some time to get used to it." Like they heard him, the figures started to move together. They all took 3 steps toward the building, then stopped. The symbols on the floor lit up one last time before they faded away. The store lights went back to normal, and the creepy feeling from the last few hours was gone. "It's done," Raymond said, wrapping a handkerchief around his cut palm. He handed me another for my hand. "The transfer is complete." I bound my wound, questions tumbling through my mind. "How long have you been the Guardian?" Raymond leaned against the counter, suddenly looking much older, as if the weight of years he'd been carrying had finally caught up to him. 50 years, he said. "I took over in 72, as you read in the journal. The former Guardian, Joseph Keller, died unexpectedly. Heart attack, they said, but his face..." He trailed off, then shook his head. "It doesn't matter now. What matters is that you understand what you've inherited." Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten. The entities remained in their positions, but they seemed less substantial now, fading as dawn approached. "This place," Raymond continued, gesturing around the store, "isn't just a gas station. The building isn't important. What matters is the land it stands on. This is a crossroads between worlds, a thin spot in the boundary that separates our reality from something else. The indigenous people knew about it long before settlers arrived. They left warnings in the form of rock carvings up in the hills." "And the entities?" I asked. "What are they exactly?" "Guardians, like us, but from the other side. They test humans who work here to ensure we respect the rules. The rules maintain the boundary, keep it from weakening further." Raymond paused, watching as the first rays of sunlight crept over the eastern mountains. "They weren't always as structured as they are now. The rules evolved over time, created by guardians who noticed patterns, who learned what appeased them. As the sunlight touched the gas station, the entities began to fade more rapidly. The old man in the brown coat was the first to disappear, simply blinking out of existence. The woman with messy hair turned and walked behind the building, never emerging on the other side. The ice freezer man disappeared quickly. The roof walker sank into the ground, and the glowing-eyed figure simply turned its back and seemed to step into a gap in the air that closed behind it. "They'll return tonight," Raymond said, "and every night. Their appearance, their behavior, it's all part of maintaining the balance. If the rules aren't followed, the boundary weakens, and if it weakens too much..." He left the sentence unfinished, but I understood. The consequences would be dire. Raymond pulled a set of keys from his pocket and placed them on the counter. "These are yours now. The master key to the gas station, the storeroom, and the apartment upstairs." Apartment? I hadn't noticed any living space above the store. Small place above the back room. Nothing fancy, but it's part of the property. No rent, no mortgage. The deed transfers to you as part of the guardianship. My lawyer will handle the paperwork today. I picked up the keys. Why me? I finally asked the question that had been bugging me since that first night. Of all the people who could have walked in here looking for a job, why did you hire me? Raymond almost smiled. You think it was chance that brought you here? To this specific gas station in the middle of nowhere, Montana? He shook his head. I put out the word that I needed someone. Not through regular channels, I just reached out. The boundary does the rest. It calls to those who can serve it. You felt like you had to apply here, right? Something pulling you to this place even though it made no logical sense. I nodded slowly, remembering how I'd driven past 3 other gas stations advertising help wanted before stopping at this one. Something about the faded sign and the quiet made me stop. That's the boundary recognizing a potential guardian, Raymond explained. It's been happening for centuries. Long before this was a gas station, it was a trading post. Before that, just a marked spot on indigenous trade routes. The boundary has always needed a human counterpart, someone to maintain the rules, to serve as intermediary. He looked out the window at the day getting brighter. I'll stay for a week to help you settle in, show you how to manage the business side of things, introduce you to the suppliers, that sort of stuff. The real job, the guardianship, you've already begun learning. I thought of all the entries in the journal, the collected knowledge of past guardians. What about the rules? Do they ever change? They can, Raymond said. The core ones stay the same, but each guardian adds their own observations, their own protocols. You've already noticed patterns the journal didn't mention, the precise timing of the roof walker's steps, the way the ice freezer man leaves puddles that evaporate. Those details matter. They help the next guardian. I looked around the store, this ordinary-looking gas station that hid such a weird purpose. My life had changed completely in the span of a week. From desperate job seeker to guardian of an interdimensional boundary. It should have seemed absurd, but standing there with my bleeding palm and the leftover energy of the ritual still vibrating through the building, I couldn't deny the truth of it. I'll need to add to the journal, I said, thinking aloud. Record what happened tonight. Make my own observations as they come. Raymond nodded approvingly. That's the spirit. Each guardian adds to our knowledge, helps the next one survive longer. I thought of Thomas Brenner, Anna Lou, and Jason Mercer, the employees who had broken the rules and paid with their lives. And the ones who failed, who broke the rules. Raymond's face got darker. The beings have to keep the boundary from their side. If a potential guardian proves untrustworthy or disrespectful, they can't risk leaving the boundary in their hands. He looked down at his bandaged palm. It's not personal for them. It's just what they do. Their job. It was fully morning now, and the sun made the gas pumps look bright. Everything seemed normal again, but that was misleading. I need coffee, Raymond said abruptly, moving toward the machine at the back of the store. And you need to take stock of your new property. The apartment isn't much, but it's free. You can move your things in today if you want. I watched him pour coffee from the pot I'd made hours earlier. His movements relaxed now that the ritual was complete. The transfer of responsibility seemed to have made him feel better. 50 years as guardian. It was hard to imagine doing that job for so long. "Does everyone serve for decades?" I asked. Raymond sipped his coffee. "Most do. Once you become guardian, you tend to stay until you can't handle it anymore. My heart's not what it used to be. Doctors gave me 6 months, maybe a year. Not enough time to keep training night employees in the hopes of finding another good candidate." He pointed at me with his cup. "Then you showed up, and I knew right away you had what it takes." I felt proud that he picked me, but also nervous about the responsibility. I was really curious about the boundary and whatever it was that needed guarding. "So I maintain the rules, monitor the boundary, and eventually find my own replacement," I summarized. "That's the job," Raymond confirmed. "Though with any luck, you'll have decades before needing to worry about that last part." He finished his coffee and set the cup down. "Come on, I'll show you the apartment. Then we can start going through the paperwork. There's a lot to transfer." As I followed Raymond to the back of the store, I realized this new job meant I was joining something much older than I thought. People had been working here for hundreds of years, dealing with these weird creatures and figuring out how to handle them. It felt good knowing I wasn't the only one who'd had to learn all this strange stuff. The Gas and Go was more than just a job now. It was my thing to take care of. Something brought me here, and now I got why. I wasn't just some random person who needed work. I belonged here. As the new person running Pine Creek Gas and Go, I needed to learn everything Raymond could show me about this normal-looking store that did some pretty weird stuff.